Hello and welcome. Thank you all for attending today's session. We encourage attendees to introduce themselves in the chat with their name and affiliation and update their name in the WebEx window if need be. My name is Jasmine Shoemaker, and I, along with my colleagues Joe Lee and Lorraine Ojo Ohaikwari, founded the UMBC Libraries AI Symposium. On the heels of this successful AI Privacy and Ethics Symposium of April 2024, we're back with a new iteration. This fall's title is Exploring the Gadgets and Gizmos in Your AI Toolkit. This semester, our speakers will highlight various topics ranging from Google Gemini and its integration into UMBC platforms to the broader legal implications of using generative AI and much more. We were intentional with the selection of our speakers, remaining mindful to include librarians, teaching faculty, and students from diverse backgrounds. Although this platform is not an endorsement of specific AI tools, we wish to create an open forum for attendees to learn and interact with this ever-evolving and impactful topic. Our series would not be possible without the contributions from the following centers, departments, and organizations: the Hackerman Foundation, UMBC's Division of Information Technology, the Center for Social Science Scholarship, UMBC's Center for Artificial Intelligence, the Department of Information Systems, and the Department of Computer Science and Electrical Engineering. Today, we welcome our colleague, Brianna Hughes, our second speaker of the series. Brianna Hughes is a STEM reference and instruction librarian at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, where she also leads the library's graduate student services and coordinates several AI-related initiatives. Her work focuses on inclusive, accessibility-minded approaches to research support and information literacy instruction, and particularly within the sciences and engineering fields. Brianna actively incorporates AI ethics and literacy into her teaching, helping students and faculty critically evaluate tools and technologies shaping scholarly inquiry. She regularly presents on AI in academic librarianship, including at the Future of Information Literacy, AI and Library Instruction Symposium hosted by NYU, and the Association of College and Research Libraries, or ACRL's 2025 conference. Her chapter, Whipping Up Lesson Plans with the Artificial Intelligence, will appear in the forthcoming AI and Library Instruction Cookbook from ACRL Publications. Through hands-on workshops, peer-reviewed contributions, and cross-campus collaboration, Brianna advocates for intentional, equity-focused adoption of AI in higher education. She holds an MLIS and a graduate certificate in museum studies from the University of South Carolina. Brianna's presentation today is titled Assembling an AI Toolbox: Access-Oriented Approaches to Scholarship and Instruction. We welcome questions in the chat throughout the session. Feel free to private message myself or one of my colleagues with any questions as you see fit. Questions will be asked at the end of the session. And with that, I'll turn it over to our speaker.
Thank you. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Hughes, and I am a STEM reference and instruction librarian and the Graduate Student Services librarian at UMBC. It's great to see so many folks are here today and are interested in learning about some AI tools. Today, we're going to assemble an AI toolkit together, focusing on access-oriented approaches to research, instruction, and scholarship. My interest in this topic began a couple of years ago through conversations with colleagues and other faculty here at UMBC. Working in higher education, many times we hear more about the harm that AI does to the work ethic and critical thinking skills of our students, the integrity of coursework, to our environment, and even to our own jobs. And sometimes we forget about the potential for good that it can bring to our libraries and classrooms. In an effort to highlight the good that AI can do, I thought about the students at UMBC and the various barriers they face during their college experience. I wondered how AI might help students smash through those barriers and have more fulfilling and positive experiences in their courses. And of course, those of us who work in higher education often have student retention and satisfaction in the back of our minds. If we can use AI to improve the student experience, then I think that is all for the better. Here is the trajectory for today, the big picture. We'll start by setting the stage for our conversation about AI tools for accessibility. Part of that context building will include an exploration of what the research and literature says about AI supports for various student populations. Then we'll dive into exploring some of the AI tools that I have found and gathered, focusing on a few tools for each group of students we are highlighting today. I have demonstrations of some of the tools so that you can see some of their capabilities and uses. I also have an assessment tool to use when considering AI tools, and I'll demonstrate that checklist for you. Finally, I want to conclude with a conversation about ableism and the bias that is inherent in AI tools, and I'll leave you with some resources at the end. AI is everywhere in classrooms, labs, and libraries. My goal today is to introduce you to some hopefully new tools that you can incorporate into your AI toolbox, either as a student, librarian, or instructor. I want to start with the foundational concept of an accessibility gap. We can define this as any situation when physical, digital, or technical barriers prevent people, especially those with disabilities, from fully accessing information, services, or activities. But as you'll see in a moment, issues of accessibility aren't just present for students with disabilities. There are many students who face this challenge and struggle with getting a full educational experience. Sometimes this accessibility gap is unintentional or inherent. For a long time, higher education has been a space that is harder for some students to find their place in. But doing what we can to mitigate that gap in access is extremely important now, especially as our population of students declines and colleges and universities compete for that dwindling population. One crucial thing to bear in mind is that AI can be a support and tool for good, while also widening that accessibility gap. This dichotomy is something that we'll look at throughout this presentation. So I've mentioned a few times now these different populations of students that we'll be focusing on, and here they are. These 4 groups are all growing in size as more and more students explore their own identities. This is hardly an exhaustive list of student identities or types of students that face barriers in higher education. And it's also important to keep in mind that there is a lot of overlap between these groups. So when we talk about student disabilities, today we'll be focusing mainly on students with auditory or visual disabilities. When we talk about neurodivergent students today, that includes things like autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, non-specific learning disabilities, and sensory processing disorders. We also are going to talk about non-traditional students or adult learners. And this population includes students with existing careers, multitudes of demands on their time, such as caregiving responsibilities, a commute to campus, etc. And then finally, English language learners or multilingual students. Another term is emergent language learners. So identifying the barriers that our students face can sometimes be a difficult exercise because it forces us to confront our failings or the existing biases in higher education. In coursework, common friction points include dense readings or course readings in language, the ability to plan, and a student's struggles with executive function. Also at issue is a lack of multimodal access to course content, materials, and resources, and the realities of a student's life and the demands on their time. In instruction, we juggle the growing number of students who want and need individualized support, and also just the pervasive and sometimes unchecked use of AI tools by our students and colleagues, and then determining how best to assess AI use. As a reminder, the scaffolding for my presentation is to consider the barriers, the AI tools that can support students facing those barriers, and then assessing those AI tools to ensure they are a right fit. So I've done a lot of reading on this topic of how AI can support various groups of students. And most of what I read is in agreement. AI tools can support learning and promote accessibility. We can get the most out of these tools when they are chosen with intention, aligned to a specific task or research or assignment, and paired with clear guidance. I also want to hold a healthy skepticism. The quote I have here from an article published last year from Ahmed warns that quick solutions can hinder deeper skill development if we overuse AI. My main takeaway from my literature review is that AI is neither infallible nor the villain. Its value peaks when we target a barrier and set transparent expectations. Across studies, we see many consistent themes. When I look at the literature about users with disabilities, a lot of the literature talks about real-time transcription, translation tools, and audio description that improves entry points into courses and course materials. When we talk about students with learning difficulties like dyslexia, tools that offer proofreading, summarization, and interactive support are a huge help for students. And for students who are English language learners, GPTs and related tools can demystify academic English and help sentence structure. We also look at students who are non-traditional, and when they have tools that facilitate self-paced learning and tailor to their individual needs and schedules, they really see a boost in student success. Let's look at the how of all of this. How can AI tools facilitate and ease access for our students? Here I've taken each population and briefly outlined the capabilities of the various tools. For cognitive load, tools that are planners and give the ability to simplify language and concepts and create checklists. For students who struggle with language comprehension or English language comprehension, tools that offer translation services, plain language summaries, and identify vocabulary. Students who have sensory access issues, tools that offer live captioning, transcripts, alt text or image descriptions, and then of course, text to speech and speech to text. And then students who face time constraints, tools that offer rapid summarization, search expansion, and deeper dives into course content. But let's compare this with the various ways that AI can become the roadblock. We need to also be on the lookout for tools that exhibit ableist bias. Many AI tools are not built on the principles of universal design, so many users will encounter inaccessible user interfaces, screen readers, keyboard gaps, caption errors. Finally, some of the issues come after the implementation of the tool, when we accept hallucinations as factual information, or when we over-rely on AI detectors, which are well known to be biased against non-native English speakers. So now let's get to the tools. For each barrier, I'll mention 3 tools and offer a brief demo of one of them. Just to note that the demos are not full demonstrations. I'm only going to be showing a snapshot of these tools and their capabilities. My hope is that your curiosity will be sparked and you'll want to explore some of these on your own. So the first 3 tools are for our neurodivergent students who struggle with cognitive load and executive functioning. And then here are the 3 tools that I've kind of identified that might help. The first is Goblin Tools, and it has a ton of capabilities. It's kind of a toolbox on its own. One of my favorite of its tools is the Magic To-Do List, which turns a vague task into step-by-step actions. One of Scholar C's strengths is its ability to create structured summaries, flashcards, and other study aids. Perplexity is useful for planning research sprints and summarizing while reading. For students who struggle with executive functioning, our goal is initiation and sequencing, small steps that help students overcome that initial hurdle of starting a task or assignment. And feel free to put in the chat if you've ever used any of these tools and what your experience was like. How did you find it helpful? So for the demonstration for this category, I chose Goblin Tools, and I'm going to demonstrate its Magic To-Do List generator. So it's very easy interface to use. You type your prompt into that text box there, and here the example I'm using is write a 2,000-word annotated bibliography with 6 different sources. So I'm a student in this hypothetical situation writing an annotated bibliography. Clicking the magic wand, it generates a to-do list. You see those chili peppers up on the top right of the screen? You can set kind of your neurodivergent spicy level, and it will create a more detailed or less detailed to-do list. You can also expand any of the items on the original to-do list to become their own to-do list, as you see I've done here about identifying sources. You can move the items around on the to-do list. You can check them, which crosses them out. You can edit the text in them. You can also remove items from your to-do list that you've decided you don't want to include. And here you see I expanded the to-do list, created a to-do list after this one as well. So you can keep, it's like an infinite loop of to-do lists, which I really love. For multilingual learners and anyone facing dense and hard to comprehend academic speak, here are some tools that can help. Language tool for grammar checks and paraphrasing. This is an alternative to Grammarly and one that I find to be far less intrusive, but many of the capabilities are similar. Most of us are probably familiar with Google Translate, but what you may not know is that you can use it with websites, and it's also integrated into Google Docs and Google Sheets. It's a free and safer option than some of the other AI translation tools like DeepL. Last week's presentation from Marian Hawken talked about Notebook LM, so some of you may be sick of hearing about it, but it is one of my favorite AI tools for research and scholarship, hands down. In this use case, it is great for plain language summaries of course materials, academic articles, and other documents. I also appreciate how the AI-generated content always takes you back to the user's input. So I've got two demonstrations of Google Translate here for this category. The first is demonstrating how it can translate websites. And this first website is from the CDC in Spanish. And you see on my URL bar on the far right, there's a little Google Translate icon. The website or Chrome has already picked up on the fact that this is a foreign language website. And you see there I can toggle back and forth between the original language and whatever secondary language I've chosen. And you can choose your language from a very exhaustive list of different languages. The second demonstration for Google Translate is showing it's when it's embedded into Google Docs. And it already comes in, there's no plugin that you have to download. Here I have a poem in French that I've added into a Google Doc. And under extensions in Google Translate, basically what it does is it creates a copy of the document with the translation in the copy. So it keeps your original, you select the language that you want it translated into, and it creates a new document with that translation. I find both of these tools to be fairly accurate. The translation, both of these instances of Google Translate to be very accurate. Not being a native Spanish or French speaker, I can't verify it for certain, but from my basic understanding of the languages, they look very accurate translations. For our students, having a disability can mean many different things, and focusing on just this narrow experience of auditory and visual disabilities leaves many students out. But I do think we can extend these tools to support students with other disabilities, such as sensory processing disorders, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyspraxia. Nowadays, many virtual meeting platforms have built-in closed captioning, but both Windows and Chrome have captioning tools built into their operating systems and web browsers. So you can enable captions no matter what you're viewing, whether it's a website or some other software program that you're running on your computer. Helper Bird is another one of my favorite tools, and like Goblin Tools, it's kind of a toolkit in and of its own. It includes many different supportive tools, including text-to-speech, tools that help reading comprehension, and several other visual supporting tools. There are many transcription tools out there, and I might get some pushback for including this specific one. Whisper is an open AI product, but I think it's worth considering as its strength is in its offline capabilities. And then Mac Whisper is it's similar, but it's from Mac OS, a third-party Mac OS program. You can download it to your computer, your Mac device, and it is also great for offline translation. Feel free to drop in the chat if you've used any other text-to-speech tools or captioning tools, transcription tools. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be using Helper Bird. Helper Bird has a number of different ways to use it. You can use it in their website in your browser. There's also a plugin for Google Chrome that I have that you can use as well. That can be used on any website. And then there's a new extension that you can download that embeds into the Google Workspace, so Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Sheets. First, I'm going to demonstrate the browser plugin. And so here I am on a academic journal's website. The first tool you see there, it's got that purple highlight. It helps with kind of your wandering eye, or if you have visual sensory issues, it helps you to focus. You can also do different color overlays to do speed the text. You can make the contrast very stark. Everything on the page goes black and white. You can enter this reader view, which gets rid of any kind of extra material on the web page. And then from the reader view,
and another independency in Thomas Hobbes's Leviathan.
I don't know if you can hear that. It's very quiet, but it is doing a text-to-speech read in a not so natural sounding voice, but it's still, you know, a very accessible text-to-speech. You can also do Google Translate from Helperbird, which I find is nice to not have to go out to Google Translate. But yeah, there's a lot of different tools, as you can see in that list there. Now here's the high contrast. So you can see here, everything's gone black and white. And then the next one is showing you Helperbird's capabilities in Google Doc. The list of tools that it gives you in Google is not as robust as the one that comes from their website or the browser plugin, but I still think it can be great if you are using another computer, you're not signed into your own Google account, and you don't want to use the plugin. You can still have some of the capabilities of it in Google Docs. So here you go to extensions. Once you've added the Helperbird extension, it's there to click on. And I just have a sample of writing here. One of the options is to turn on a dyslexia font, a font that's helpful for folks with dyslexia. There's an accessibility report that you can run. Obviously not so helpful when it's just text, but if there were images, it would be able to scan those as well. This one has two other text-to-speech options. You have to highlight what you want it to read. And there is a choice.
The investigation that was carried out in the current study was focused on the examination of the thermal stabilization.
So not very natural sounding, but again, the immersive reader does something similar or does the same thing, but it's a much more natural sounding.
The investigation that was carried out in the current study was focused on the examination of the thermal stabilization that is exhibited by biodegradable.
So again, some of the same capabilities as the plugin, but it's you know, much easier to use within a Google Doc. One of the biggest barriers that non-traditional or adult learners face are the multiple demands on their time. Many of these students have families or other caregiving responsibilities, longer commutes to campus or to work, careers that take precedence over their coursework, and more. For students who are balancing so much, tools that streamline their work and offer timely shortcuts are a big help. SciSpace is a tool that allows you to interact with a PDF. And I will say the name is a big misnomer. It's definitely not a tool just for STEM students. The capabilities of it can be used by anyone, whether you're humanities, social sciences, anything. Think of it as kind of like an AI assistant that is limited to just what is uploaded PDF. At Voice Aloud Reader is another text-to-speech tool that works with PDFs. There are a lot of tools out there that do this, that will read a PDF aloud to you, but this one is nice because it's very simple. It also has a very transparent user privacy and data privacy policy. Many folks are also using the text-to-speech capabilities on their mobile devices. I know that both Apple and Android phones have text-to-speech. And then I also imagine kind of listening to articles while I'm commuting to work in the morning or while I'm doing the dishes in the evening. You know, for those students who have those longer commutes or have a life at home that they have to attend to, being able to fit in coursework where you can is a big help. And again, Notebook LM. But for me, some of its best tools are the study guides, the summaries, the AI-generated podcast-style audio recaps, and the AI-generated video tutorials. And if you haven't checked those out yet, I encourage you to. It's almost uncanny how realistic they all sound. Please feel free to add in the chat any other time-saving AI tools that you've used or that you've seen your students use. So here's a demonstration of SciSpace. This is one of those tools where there's a lot of capabilities of it within it, and I can't really demonstrate all of them today. I think there is a bit of a learning curve for this one, like a lot of AI tools, but its basic capabilities are you upload a PDF, it hosts it here on SciSpace's website, and then there's a chat box on the right-hand side of the screen where you can type in questions, and it will browse the PDF and only the PDF. It doesn't go out onto the internet to find answers. It's restricted just to what's in the PDF. So here the example I gave is what is the main claim and 3 key findings, and I asked it to be sure to cite where in the article that it's found those things. So here, a pretty good summary of the main findings, the key findings. You see that it's got references that I can click on and it takes me straight to it in the PDF, so I don't have to look for it. You can also expand the source list and read like a preview of where that's taking the information from within the PDF. It gives you some suggested follow-up questions. You can also click different parts within the PDF and ask it to explain, summarize, get related papers. I found that the getting related papers thing is kind of not so helpful because really it just looks at the reference list of that PDF, which if that's not some common practice of yours when you're doing research to look at the reference list, that can be helpful. But I think most of us kind of know that that's a big help in research. So another question I'm asking it here is what does the author explain, or where does the author explain emotion enhanced memory? And I ask it to give me exact location or the sentence in the article. You also see there where it says save to notebook. Anything that the AI generates, you can save to a notebook, and you create notebooks for each article you're looking at, or if there's an assignment that you want to have a notebook for, you can save things to it. You can add additional notes, text notes to the notebook. It also saves the PDFs to the notebook, so it's all kind of bound together. So that's SciSpace. So we've explored some new tools, but let's pause before we just dive into using these tools. Before you adopt a new tool in your classroom or tell your students about it, it's always best to do an assessment of it. And I've developed this easy 3-lens checklist that we can use to evaluate AI tools. So the first question to ask is how accessible is the tool? Because when it can't bridge that accessibility gap, if on its own it has accessibility issues. Can all learners engage with the tool? Does it support screen reading capabilities? Is it easy to navigate for folks with motor limitations or mobility issues? Does it follow web content accessibility guidelines? One thing to always be thinking about is data safety and user privacy. What is the data storage situation? How long are user inputs retained, and can you delete your uploads and data? Will my inputs and information be used for training the AI model or other AI models? And perhaps most simply, can we actually find the privacy policies on the website? If those are buried too deep on the tool's website to find, I would definitely be hesitant to adopt this tool. And finally, please consider the pedagogical fit. How does this tool fit within the context of your course? Does it advance learning outcomes? Does it produce learning artifacts that you can use to verify the integrity of students' work? Is there a measurable benefit that can be assessed? So let's try this checklist out using the last tool we looked at, SciSpace. So looking at SciSpace, the accessibility, can I tab to the different chat boxes, other buttons, just using the tab key? Can I easily zoom in on the text, and is it readable at higher zooms, which it is? Is it easy to tell which button I've tabbed over to? Considering the data, does SciSpace store my file, and for how long? Is it used for training? It is a cloud tool, so I would definitely avoid uploading sensitive or licensed PDFs, but I will say it's very easy to delete PDFs. And per their privacy policy, Once a PDF has been deleted from a notebook or from your account, they don't retain it, so it's gone. And thinking about size space, the fit with your class, with your course. It does speed up reading, and it links back to the exact place in the article where it's gotten its answer from. And students can submit a small proof like the quote or page and that it helped. Let's move away from tools and talk a little bit about ableism and bias in AI. Two root issues keep showing up in the literature that I found. AI models and LLMs are trained on data that overrepresents non-disabled people. So machine learning optimizes for norms and overlooks outliers. Training happens by crawling the open web, which already carries bias. So tools amplify those biases until we intervene. We need to always remember that AI is designed for the majority of the population and excludes the minority. Where do we see this bias? There are concrete impacts of ableism. Words related to disabilities have a negative association, and AI goes out of its way to avoid using those words. For students who are English language learners or multilingual, students overwhelmingly show that AI detectors regularly overflag their writing as being AI generated, even when it is not. And when you have a generative AI tool that generates images, they often lean on stereotypes of disabilities and get assistive details wrong. Once you learn to identify bias, it's important to work against it. Here are 5 steps that you can take to combat AI bias, especially when confronted with ableism. Lessons in coursework that use AI tools need to be co-designed with disabled students or at least tested with assistive technology. Choose tools that are transparent with their sources and link back to the source material. Tools that generate citations and give you the ability to fact check are best. Be explicit with your students about how AI is to be used in your course or specific assignments. Put guardrails in assignments. Name the AI's tools that they're allowed to use and the role that those AI tools are allowed to take, and collect tiny artifacts that verifies integrity. Use that 3-step checklist that we just covered when you're considering adding an AI tool to your course. And when it comes to AI detectors, try to use them sparingly. Don't rely on them solely for identifying AI-generated content. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of resources. My reading list and bibliography is on the left there. I've done a lot of reading on this topic over the last 18 months, and if you're interested in learning more, there are some really great articles on this list. On the right is my AI toolkit, or will be my AI toolkit. It's definitely a work in progress. I hope to have everything that I've talked about today and some other tools that didn't make my slides on the toolkit by the end of this week. So I encourage you to check back then. Thank you for being here today. Thank you to Jasmine and Joe and Lorraine for putting together this amazing symposium. I hope that some of these tools have sparked your interest and that you'll play around with them. I also hope that this presentation has given you new ways to think about AI use in your classroom. I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to do some more demonstrations, or I also would love to open this up to conversation and we can share other tools that we have all used.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Brianna. I've learned a lot. Some of these tools I think you and I have talked about, just chatted about informally in the office, so it's great to see them in action. We'll go ahead and get started with questions that we received in the chat. I received one DM to me, so I'll start with that one. You touched on this a little bit, Brianna, but this attendee asked specifically, is there any literature about using AI to help first-generation students overcome barriers? Maybe specific authors that you've read?
So that definitely wasn't a population that I considered in my research. I think a lot of times we lump first-generation students in with non-traditional students. They definitely face barriers that other non-traditional students, I mean, it's not an umbrella, I mean, it is an umbrella term, but it definitely doesn't cover everyone. So I think there's going to be some of the articles that I read about non-traditional students that will mention first-gen students and also be applicable in those situations, but I never found anything that was explicitly about first-generation students. But I think that's a great point, because when you think about first generation students, oftentimes they face technology barriers, either because they don't have as much experience with technology as other students do. They don't have access to the same technology that other students do. It maybe just isn't talked about at home, or they've not experienced it in school. So they definitely will face barriers when it comes to using the technology.
Thank you for that, Brianna. We had another question in the chat. Is Language Tool, which I believe was one of the tools that you had recommended, is it as expensive as Grammarly?
No, I don't think it is. I don't have a paid account with either of those, so I don't remember off the top of my head how much either costs. I do think that's one of the things when I was comparing language tools in general, not just Language Tool, with Grammarly and some of the other ones, it was on the cheaper end. But I also found that the things that you get for the free version, the list is a little bit longer than for Grammarly. I think Grammarly, the paywall comes up a lot sooner than with Language Tool.
I can ask the next one. I think we're taking turns. I think Lorraine is taking some notes. So Jillian asked, do these tools work with non-OCR'd documents, OCR being optical character recognition?
Yeah, so the ones I demonstrated today they do work on websites, non-OCR PDFs and documents. I'm sure that there are some out there that you do have to be using OCR documents to make the tool work, but the ones I showed today and mentioned don't include, don't require you to use OCR.
Thanks for clarifying, Brianna. I'll go ahead and ask the next question. So how reliable are these AI tools? And let me see, I'm sorry. And do they have a tendency to make up information like ChatGPT?
So I think it depends on what you mean when you say reliable, how you define reliable in this instance. Most of the ones that I have shared with you today, they link back to the source material. So they're only going to be as good as the input that you give them. Most of them rely on you uploading PDFs or sharing links to web pages or working directly with web content. Most of these were not generative AI like ChatGPT, right? It's not, doing a lot of independent thinking on its own. A lot of it is manipulating source material. And when I say manipulating, I don't mean like twisting it. I mean using the source material and creating a new output that helps students with accessibility issues. So for me, it's not really a question of reliability. I mean, maybe it's more like, do these tools do what I need them to do? In that way, yes, I would say they are reliable. But they're not going to hallucinate the same way that you see in Gemini or ChatGPT.
Thanks, Brianna. Okay, our next question. Are you taking climate and resource consumption considerations into account with these tools, especially as we are talking about purported benefits for disabled people? We know that LLMs require massive compute power in larger and larger data centers. We also know that data centers of this capacity exacerbate the potential for climate disasters. We also know that disabled people are, by multiple factors, more likely to be seriously impacted by climate disasters, including greater risk of death. So why should we adopt these tools that can come with these serious, often deadly ethical risks?
Yeah, I mean, you can't have a conversation about AI without considering the sustainability impact, the impact on climate, the impact that AI tools and, the servers that they require has on marginalized populations. I think it's really hard to separate that conversation from any other conversation about AI. I also want to be clear, I'm not advocating that you have to use these tools in your classroom. If you're not comfortable with the environmental implications, then don't use AI tools. I mean, I'm not here saying that, you know, your students are going to be at a huge disadvantage if you're not using AI tools. But at the same time, students are already using AI tools. And so helping them identify the right ones to use in given situations, I think you're doing a disservice if you're not talking about it, because they're going to use it regardless of whether you talk about it in class or not. But yeah, I always am in the back of my mind thinking about the climate change and the impact that AI has on the environment. But I think you can still talk about the good that AI can do in certain situations while acknowledging that it's also doing an incredible amount of harm to the world that we live in terms of the environment. And then the societal impact, perhaps, of certain populations of people.
All right, thank you, Brianna. So moving on to the next question, how many of these AI tools are freely available to users? Are there, I'm sorry, give me one second. Are there some that include a paywall?
So all the tools I showed you with you today, I do not have paid accounts with. I only have, there's only like one AI tool that I pay for access to, and that's ChatGPT. But everything I showed you today is free or has that freemium level, right? So everything that I demonstrated was done with a free or no cost subscription. I did have to sign up for accounts for a few of them, but it wasn't even like sign up for an account and you're getting 30 days free. Like I never shared my credit card information with any of these AI tools. So everything you saw here today was done with free tools or at a free level of a account with one of these tools. And they're all readily accessible. Yeah, I mean, most of them are browser based. Some of them have desktop applications that you could download to your computer if you wanted to, but you know, it's the same capabilities as the browser based. And yeah, it's very easy to access as long as you have an internet connection.
All right. We have another question. Most of our database vendors prohibit using content they distribute in any Gen AI tools or third-party systems. How do you handle that when guiding students about using items in SciSpace or other Gen AI tools for summarizing? Huge challenge for us and hard to explain contracts forbid this.
Yeah, I mean, it is a hard conversation to have because students don't really care so much about that. So it's hard to make them care about it. I definitely think that that's not to say that we shouldn't talk to them about the realities of copyright and what it means that our articles are behind the library's paywall. I mean, that's a discussion that you need to have with students and warning them about uploading copyrighted material. All of the tools that I demonstrated today where I had to upload a PDF, they are left on the server of that tool. They're not part of, and I verified this, all of the tools I use today, when there's a PDF that I've uploaded, it's not being scanned or used in any kind of AI training. It's limited to just your account, just your use of the tool. While I know that's not, it still doesn't answer the question of if our vendors have said you're not allowed to use PDFs in these generative AI tools, you know, I understand that that's their policy, but I think using these tools, you're doing as much as you can to make sure copyrighted material stays protected and it's not being used in training AIs, it's not being shared on the internet. And I think there are still, you know, thinking about fair use, right? I think as long as this is still for academic purpose and you're not, you know, going to be using it to profit, I think there's still, you're on the side of the law when you're talking about copyright and these tools. Maybe not on the side of the policy for our vendors, but copyright law, I think you're in the clear because most of it falls under fair use.
All right, moving right along, we have another question from someone in the chat. I helped with making an accessible library search engine for the American Printing House for the Blind. Some things to consider regarding accessibility. Does it work with a screen reader? Does it have sliders? That may be a potential problem. What does it look like in high contrast mode? Does zooming break the web page? Do the tools for the visually impaired write alt text? And so I believe with these considerations and their role in the American Printing House for the Blind, their question was, do the tools that you mentioned for the visually impaired write alt text?
Some of them. So Helper Bird does have the, one of the tools that it includes is an alt text generator. There's also not a lot, there are a number of alt text generating tools that I know of out there where you can upload documents or images and it will create alt text for you. I don't use those. I haven't looked into the privacy or user security concerns with some of those tools, so I can't speak to how great they are to use. But I know Helper Bird does have the ability to generate alt text. I'm not sure about, let me go back in my slides so I can remember. Yeah, so the rest of the ones I mentioned here are more about captioning and transcription. So the alt text doesn't apply, but Helper Bird does have that option.
Okay, perfect. Carrie has a comment and then a follow-up question. Comment was, I suggest adding to the pedagogical fit part of the evaluation checklist. How might the tool allow students to subvert your goals for student learning? And then Carrie's question was, what are some examples of tiny artifacts? I think they heard you refer to it as that, to verify integrity.
Yeah, so Carrie's first point about subverting course goals, I think that's a great one. I think definitely, AI tools should be used to promote course content and to promote learning. But again, I go back to, if students are going to be using AI, they are going to be using AI tools to subvert course goals. I mean, a lot of them, it's a way to cheat and a way to breeze through the class without doing as much work as their colleagues or their peers. But yeah, definitely, I think that's a great point to consider. Does this tool have the ability to help the students cheat or subvert your course goals? That's a great one. And I'm sorry, will you remind me what her question was?
Yeah, absolutely. What are some examples of the tiny artifacts you refer to verify the integrity?
So that could be a lot of different things. It could be having the students copy and paste the output that the AI tool gives them into their assignment that they have to turn into you, so that you can see exactly what the output they got was and have them do some kind of follow-up interaction with that output, right? So have them share with you the summary that SciSpace, for example, gave you, and then have them draft 3 discussion questions that come from that summary. Other examples would be like screenshots, right? Having them take screenshots of output so that, again, you can verify how they were using it. I also heard recently, so I attended a faculty meeting with the biology department where they were talking about AI, and one of the members of the faculty there said that he has a Google form that he uses and has his students submit through the Google form how and when they use AI tools in their coursework. And I think that's a really interesting and clever way of tracking how and when students use it, what tools they use, not only to keep track of the way they use AI, but also to gather that information that potentially could be used in assessment, building a toolbox of your own. If you notice commonalities, like all of my students are using this AI tool for this assignment, how can you make that work to your advantage? Yeah, I just thought that was a really clever way of gathering that data in a very easy and simple way.
All right, thank you again. We have one last question from the chat, but again, if anybody else would like to unmute and ask, you're more than welcome to. The last question, first of all, thanks for the presentation. What information literacy issues have you noticed when working with students using these tools, and how have you gone about addressing them?
Yeah, I mean, so students are oftentimes not transparent when they're using AI tools. So there's many times where I would have no way of knowing that they're using these AI tools. And then it's kind of like when you see issues of information literacy, I necessarily can't attribute them to an AI tool because I don't know that they're using one. But I do think being transparent and communicative with students is really key. I think, and I mean that in a couple different ways. Firstly, I mean, like when I myself have used an AI tool to generate course content or use it in the course of my teaching with them, I'm transparent with them about that because I think being transparent with them encourages them to be transparent and communicative with you. When they see that you're cool with AI, they're often more likely to open up about their own AI use. And I do think having conversations at the start of a class, if you're doing a one-shot or as a part of your lesson, or if you are teaching a semester course, having it be a conversation you have at the beginning of the semester or maybe throughout the semester about what are the information literacy implications in using AI? What are the media literacy implications about using AI? I think just having very transparent and open communication with students, no matter what kind of setting you're in, I think is going to be the key to limiting as many issues as possible.
Thank you so much for that, Brianna. One last call for any questions. I'll give it a beat.
And yeah, I saw a couple of comments in the chat about my toolbox list being blank. It's coming. I ran out of time. So check back later today and I'll have it updated for you.
We can include it with the slides just to make sure that folks have access. All right. Well, thanks everyone so much for attending. To continue supporting future symposia, please reach out to members of this group. We would also greatly appreciate any feedback that you'd have for the session. You may have to copy and paste it. Thank you so much, Joe. With that said, we will be having another session. We hope to see you back next Wednesday, October 15th, same time and place, with Georgetown's Nina Simone Edwards presentation, Beyond the Hype, Embedding Ethics in AI Policy for Libraries and Higher Education. Thank you all so much for being here today.